Hello, and welcome to Unity of Fredericksburg. My name is Linda, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you to the Unity of Fredericksburg weekly online gathering. At Unity of Fredericksburg, we are advancing the movement of spiritual awakening and transformation through unity, a positive path for spiritual living. We thank those of you watching on YouTube live or later and invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're able to attend live, we encourage you to join us in the Zoom community room for the full Sunday morning experience, including music, prayer, and connection. Our weekly newsletter includes the Sunday service link, and you can subscribe to receive that on our website at uofva.org. For everyone local to Central Virginia, Unity of Fredericksburg offers a variety of fun and enriching in-person gatherings every month. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter at uofva.org for all the details. Our message today comes from our minister, Reverend Cheryl Fair. And now, here's Reverend Cheryl.
Thank you, Linda, and welcome everyone who is with me in the Zoom room here today, and those of you watching on YouTube or Facebook, whether you're watching live on YouTube or catching up with us later. We appreciate you showing up and being a part of the energy that is Unity of Fredericksburg. And our broadcast date today is Sunday, October the 12th, and have a little bit of news from the Spiritual Passages email that I subscribe to. And just want to point out to you all that tomorrow is Indigenous Peoples Day. This is celebrated in the U.S., honoring the history, culture, and contributions of Native American, Alaska Native, and Indigenous communities. So, Indigenous Peoples Day calls us to remember that we walk on holy ground, land honored as sacred by those who first dwelled here. Indigenous wisdom teaches that the earth is not our possession, but our relative, alive and worthy of reverence. Their enduring cultures remind us that strength can rise from hardship and that spirit cannot be erased. And here's a quote from Chief Seattle. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. So that's a little bit to help us be mindful tomorrow for Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, our focus here in the fourth quarter of 2025, up until we reach the holiday season, we are leaning into practical application of all of the principles that we talk about. So in the third quarter, we took a tour through Unity's 12 powers. Last week and this week, we are looking at, again, practical application of these principles. So my title today is called The Engine of Creative Process. So creation being the process of bringing something into existence. And on an individual level, this is something we are doing all the time because we are creating our life experience. Now, on a cultural level, all cultures are rich with creation stories. So I started out by mentioning Indigenous Peoples Day. So I want to share with you briefly the creation story from the Shawnee tribe in the US. It centers on a character called Our Grandmother. Now, there is a name for Our Grandmother, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that and mispronounce it. So, but Our Grandmother created the world from a state of nothingness by shaping earth on the back of a turtle and bringing to life mountains, forests, and water. She also created animals and people to live on the new land. And the story emphasizes the connection between people and nature, viewing the natural world as a continuous dance of creation where all things give and receive life. So that's one creation story. For those who have a Christian heritage, whether or not you practice Christianity or not, the Bible begins with two different creation stories in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Many folks who grew up in Christianity actually don't know that there are two completely different stories, because you tend to hear kind of a mixture of the two stories cobbled together. And I'm going to provide a summary that is in that format. So the Genesis creation stories depict a God forming the universe in 6 days, transforming darkness into light. Sky, land, and life, and birds and fish appear on day 5. Animals and humans appear on day 6. And then this God rests on the 7th day, blessing all of creation and declaring it as very good. Now, of course, in Unity, we have a framework that helps us to bring meaning to Scripture, personal meaning, through metaphysical interpretation and to apply that in our lives. So I want to hear a little bit from Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore and his approach to looking at these creation stories. Now, what I'm actually going to be reading to you is from Heart-Centered Metaphysics, which we have been using as a guide for much of this year. So this is actually the author, the Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselbeck, talking about Fillmore's approach. So Charles Fillmore had a distinct way of metaphysically interpreting the creation stories in the book of Genesis. In his book, Mysteries of Genesis, Fillmore interpreted the first creation story found in Genesis 1 to mean that the creative process begins first in consciousness and includes a balance of both thinking and feeling natures and takes place entirely in mind. His interpretation of the second creation story found in Genesis 2 is that we take an idea in consciousness and clothe it in form. So as we look at Bible stories as activity happening in consciousness, we see creation not as an isolated event that happened eons ago. We see creation as an ongoing process for each and every one of us as we create the experience of our own human life. And this creation process is happening all the time, whether or not we are awake to it or paying attention to it. So I'm sure all of us, I'll ask you, have you ever recalled a time in your life when you were just operating on autopilot? You weren't reflecting at all about things of a spiritual nature. You're just getting through the day. You might, perceive that things are coming at you and you're having to deal with them, all those kinds of things. But you're still operating in the creative process, right? You're still creating your experience by how you label things, what you think about things, the kind of framework you're looking through. Now, here on Sunday mornings, we're continually engaged in ways to remind ourselves to become awake, wake up to spirit, to be awake, to stay awake, and to actively participate in creating the experience of our lives. Now, when we say awake, awake to what? So, awake to the truth that the activity of creation is happening at the point of us, just as it happens in the universe, right? So here is a quote from Heart-Centered Metaphysics. While we speak of divine mind and our mind, it's important to remember that our minds have consciousness in divine mind. It's not separate. That divine mind, which is another name for that which we call God, is present within us and we are present within it. As the example that Jesus gave us in his teachings, as he said repeatedly, the Father and I are one. So your mind is an individual aspect of divine mind. And guess what? You are responsible or managing the quality of that expression at the point of view. And that is what we're here to become awake to stay awake to. And realizing that that engine of creative process is happening all the time at that universal level and the individual level. That's what we're working on staying awake to all the time. Jesus presented this in a number of different ways in his teachings. In particular, there's a discussion in the Gospel of John, chapter 5. Now, the discussion is actually about whether or not something was done on the Sabbath, because the ancient Jews had some strict rules, and I think many people still do, about what's to be done on the Sabbath and what not. And Jesus' response was in John 5:17, my Father is still working, and I also am working, because this is a constant process that's happening. And we're doing this work on an individual level, just like Jesus says, I'm doing the work, and the universe is doing the work. So the question is how we're doing it, right? And here's another quote from Heart Centered Metaphysics: the clarity and purity by which divine ideas are expressed are determined by our level of consciousness. So when we are awake, we can apply ourselves to managing the quality of our consciousness and how we create our experience. So, how do we do that, right? So the primary level that will always be the entry point, no matter what practice we are talking about, is realizing and living into our own divine identity. Just like Jesus said, the Father and I are one. And that is the same for us. Now, we can use tools from Unity, such as the 12 powers. The 12 powers remind us of aspects of divine mind that we have within us. And so they are easy tools for us to say, oh, I want to enhance this power or that power that I have within me. Now, last week, we talked about a particular approach to apply using 3 easy steps: acknowledge, release, and affirm. So if you weren't with us last week, then go back and find that recording from October the 5th so that you can practice that practice, and it also weaves in the 12 powers. So today we're looking at things from this angle of the creation process, and we're going to use the stories in the Bible as an inspiration. Now, I'm going to be skimming here, my friends, because we only have so much time on Sunday morning. But for those of you who are interested in a deep dive on this, I do suggest that you look into heart-centered metaphysics, and you will find an entire chapter or two that goes into the creative process based on those biblical stories and kind of shows you one step at a time. We're going to kind of do it quickly. But so what I would ask you to do is take a deep breath. And I'd like for you to bring to mind something that's going on in your life that you are seeking prayer for. So just, something that's going on that you can practice with as we go through these steps. Okay, you got something? Hopefully you have something. Just come up with something off the top of your head so you have something to work with over the next few minutes. Now, just to begin, we know that when we are reflecting on our own creation process, we can do that from a positive or optimistic state of mind. And I think many of us would say, yes, that's me. That's how I do it. But we can also be prompted to this level of reflection by things that might show up as turmoil in our lives, challenges, right? So it's interesting to note that the creation story in Genesis 1 begins with the universe before this creation activity and describes it as darkness without form and void. And In Heart-Centered Metaphysics, our author Paul Hasselbeck is pointing out that the original Hebrew words equivalents for without form and void actually mean chaos, emptiness, desolation. So is that a state that you have ever experienced? Have you ever experienced moments that feel like chaos, that feel like emptiness, like I don't know what to do with this? Um, here is, want to give you a quote, and let me find the source for this quote. And this is in Heart-Centered Metaphysics. There are lots of wonderful quotes in here, and this is actually from a a learner's workbook from Unity School of Religious Studies in 1998 called The Creative Process. So, with regards to this darkness that is cited in the biblical story, we begin by acknowledging the need for and accepting the presence of the chaos, darkness that may be present in our experience right now. Darkness preceded each day of creation. Our choice is to affirm that God's good is present in the chaos, to see beyond outer appearances to inner truth. So that's a process that begins even before we get to step one of this creative process, this creation process. And I'll note for those of you who are with us last week, this is the first step of those 3 steps I talked about last week called acknowledgement. Is if you're feeling that chaos, that darkness, that desolation, it's taking that moment to really look into that, to really feel it and say, how is this showing up? How am I feeling? How is this impacting me and keeping me from doing what I want to do? So, whether or not you are feeling a sense of void and darkness or you're excited about a new phase, let's get going on this engine of creation process, which starts with the first step. You'll know it. Let there be light. So, with this step, we shine the light of spiritual awakening. As we did with our 12 power meditation practice, some of you may remember, we had a point where we were literally kind of tapping on our forehead. This is the seat of our power of understanding. And we had an affirmation there saying, divine nature is awake within me. So saying to ourselves, whatever this situation is, I am awake. I'm intentionally shining the light of the divine into whatever this situation is. And as it says in Genesis 1, then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So you can do that for yourself. So bring to mind your circumstance. Take a moment right now, claim it with me. Let there be light. All right, that's step 1. Step 2 in this engine of creative process is faith. So, from Charles Fillmore and the Mysteries of Genesis, the second step in creation is the development of faith or the firmament. So, the Bible refers to a firmament. Let's see what we have on that. Um, and again, this is from Charles Fillmore in the book Prosperity. A firmament must be established. That is a firm place in the mind, a dividing of the true from the apparent. This is done through affirmation. As you affirm God as your supply and support, your words will in due season become substance to you, the substance of faith. So, again, bring to mind the circumstance that you're working with today. Here's an affirmation. I'll say it once and then you can say it with me, okay? As the power of faith, I perceive truth present in all circumstances. Say it with me. As the power of faith, I perceive truth present in all circumstances. So be it. All right. Step 3 in the engine of creative process is imagination. So this is a good point in your process to lean into dreaming, spinning possibilities, asking yourself, with this situation, how do I want to feel? Because enhancing those feelings, diving into those feelings will help your imagination have something to grip onto and open you up to possibilities. So, again, bring your situation to mind. Here's an affirmation. I'll say it once and then you can repeat it with me. As divine imagination, I expand the scope of possibility. Say it with me. As divine imagination, I expand the scope of possibility. All right. So we've done step one. What was step one? Let there be light. Step two, faith. Step three, imagination. Step four, in the engine of creative process, is will. Now, I'll remind you, when we talked about the power of will, it has to do with making choices and being willing. So think about your situation, folks. What are you willing to do? Who are you willing to be in that situation? And here's our affirmation. I am the power of will, willing to make choices with ease and confidence. Say it with me. I am the power of will, willing to make choices with ease and confidence. Next up, step 5 in this engine of creative process is wisdom, also known as discernment and judgment, right? So this step is associated with our innate power to evaluate all of those options that we've been tapping into and sense what is in alignment with the highest good. Here is our affirmation. I employ spiritual wisdom, attuning myself to the highest good in all circumstances. Say it with me. I employ spiritual wisdom, attuning myself to the highest good in all circumstances. All right. Step 6 in the engine of creative process. You guessed it, friends. It's love. So I've got a quote here for you. Let me find it. Flipping through so many pages here today. All right, let me see where this is from. This is again from the workbook called The Creative Process from the Unity School. And here it says, our next step is to add love to everything we think, do, and say. When we can truly express love toward all without regard to what the physical world seems to tell us, we are completing our work in consciousness. So there you go. Here's our affirmation for step 6. Love is the divine principle I use to guide myself every step of the way. Say it with me. Love is the divine principle I use to guide myself every step of the way. All right. Now, since we are reflecting on this biblical model, there are 7 steps, right? Because in that story, there's 7 days. And of course, on the 7th day was claimed as a day of rest. So let me see what I have for you on that and where it comes from. This is coming from Charles Fillmore, The Mysteries of Genesis. The 7th day refers to the mind's realization of fulfillment. It's resting in the assurance that all that has been imaged in it will come forth in expression. So, with that step in rest, we return to our foundation of faith. And the rest happens when we get quiet within. So the rest refers to our time in the silence. Now, this process may not literally take 7 days. It can show up in whatever frequency is working for you. But we need to always have that phase of rest, that phase of reflection, that time in the silence, in the stillness. This is a listening time after a phase of doing in different ways. Even when we're doing in prayer, then we need to punctuate that with time in the silence. So here is an affirmation for this seventh step. As the power of faith, I rest in the assurance of good expressing. As the power of faith, I rest in the assurance of good expressing. So there are our 7 steps based on the model of the biblical stories of creation. This creative process is another practice we can use to practically apply our unity principles. And of course, we've used some of the 12 powers in that, but you can go back and I'm sure you can use every single one of them when it comes to whatever issue it is that you've chosen to reflect on as we talk today. This creative process is the engine behind how you experience your life, and you are the operator of this engine. You're the one with your consciousness guiding it and giving it power as you tap into all that is, or that which we call God mind. You decide how you will experience your life. When you are pleased with how things are going, practice gratitude, my friends. When you are not pleased with how things are going, practice gratitude, my friends, and use one of these practices that we've been talking about recently. You have all that you need to experience the life that you desire, no matter what events and conditions show up. And you have that capacity to say, into whatever darkness might be present, let there be light. And to work with yourself to improve the quality of the experience that you are having, and to celebrate all of it with gratitude. So we're going to move now into our time of meditation. So let's begin with a few deep breaths. And just settle a little bit further into your seat. Feel the breath moving in and out of the body. And we begin to prepare our consciousness for meditation by saying again, let there be light. Let there be light. Shine that divine light into every cell of the body. Start down at your toes and work your way gently up through the legs, through the seat, up through the core of the body, into the shoulders and arms, up the neck and all the way up to the crown of your head, shining the light. Shining the light into every thought and feeling, belief and attitude held in consciousness. Feeling the energy of that divine light expressing in every circumstance of your life. And let's take a few moments right now in the stillness together. And as we begin to bring our attention back to this moment, this divine appointment right here, right now, just continue to feel that divine light expressing through every cell in your body, through every aspect of consciousness, shining the light into those beliefs and attitudes that need to come along and wake up, shining the light into all aspects of your life and being grateful for those. I'm going to close our time of meditation today with an affirmation from this book called This Life is Yours by Reverend Linda Martella Whitsett and her daughter, Alicia Whitsett. This is an affirmation for imagination. Creating is natural to me. Starting now, I aim to create the future I have been dreaming about. I rekindle my capacity to daydream, to be the author of fantastical tales. Imagining the life I have longed for, I paint a visual picture of me in that life. I live in that longed for life so intently that I feel today the way I expect to feel in that future. I live in the state of imagination as I become the fulfillment of my dream. So that seemed like a wonderful way to close out our time reflecting on the engine of creative process. So we're going to close with one more affirmation. All right. As I affirm, let there be light, I create the life experience I desire. Say it with me, friends. As I affirm, let there be light, I create the life experience I desire. And I visualize each and every one of you claiming let there be light and creating the life experience that you desire. So thank you for being here, and I'm going to hand it back to our service leader today, Linda.
Thank you, Reverend Cheryl, and thanks for watching the weekly broadcast from Unity of Fredericksburg. Visit our website, uofva.org, to learn more about our mission of spiritual awakening and transformation, and support our ministry with your financial donation. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.